Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen, and I'm joined by my usual podcast partner, former NHL defenseman Tom Laidlaw, who played for a decade with the New York Rangers and Los Angeles Kings. This is the Laidlaw and Allen Report. I'm Allen, he's Laidlaw. And, we were in the off-season, Tom, but, starting to hear a lot of discussion about when the season is going to start. Obviously, Gary Bettman has put a January 1st date as when he would like to start. And he would like to play 82 games. But we have this NBC commitment to the Olympics that's sitting out there in July. If we're really going to play this, so that sort of hamstrings. But now we're hearing, well, what if we just take a 3-week hiatus while they're playing the Olympics and then we come back? I've heard players say, or read, I should say, that players have saying, well, it's 82 games or nothing.
Yeah, right.
Which sounds a lot like what we heard in baseball.
Yeah.
I think, and this is where I want to launch this discussion, that this is, and I say this acknowledging that Gary Bettman shut down the league for an entire year.
Yep.
But I think this is the biggest and most difficult and challenging decision he's ever made. Because, in that lockout year, owners had been preparing for losing a season.
Yep.
Players had been preparing for losing a season, and then it happened. Mm-hmm. Nobody saw this coming. Nobody is prepared. And now they have this decision to make with Donald Fehr. And look, you and I both believe that they did an excellent job of resuming the season last season and creating that bubble. But I think this is even more challenging.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Yeah, because in the case of last season, almost all the regular season games had been played. And they came up with a creative way with the 24 teams, and they kept everybody safe. And I thought it was great hockey. It was fantastic. And you're right, too. In the lockouts back in 04, 05 in particular, where they lost, I was an agent at that time. And you're right, that was planned for. Everybody. I mean, they didn't want to miss a season, but the owners knew that they needed to correct the system that we were currently under at that time. And the Player Association knew it was going to happen. In fact, Bob Goodenow was telling people it could last 2 years, and if he had stayed in his seat, he probably would have gone 2 years. So yes, you're right. That was all planned. But yeah, this is all new, and you're right. I understand why players make those statements. They want to make public statements, but to me, it's ridiculous. I mean, to say that we have to play all 82 games, therefore we get all our money, it's just not realistic. They know that. So to me, it's like you lose credibility when you make those kind of statements. But yeah, I mean, it's going to have to be the two sides getting together. At the end of the day, if it's a 48-game schedule, which we've done before, after a lockout, we did that. And after 2 different lockouts, I think we did a 48-game schedule. But then, obviously, the players need to have their salaries prorated as well. I was listening to a radio show the other day, and the guys were roughly going through the numbers of what teams, if they don't have people in the seats, between not buying the tickets and not buying concessions, how much they would lose every game. And like we talked before, I mean, it's north of $80 million for most teams if they have to pay 100% of the salaries, but they don't have people in the seats. And they're not going to do that. I mean, why would a multi-billionaire, in most cases, that owns a team lose close to $100 million so that the players can make 100% of their salaries? It's not going to happen.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of those numbers. And I just want to sort of bring it out. I did a little research this morning trying to kind of sort all this out. And, basically it comes down to in the NHL, there are 1,271 games. That's 31 teams playing 41 home games. And the average amount of take, now, obviously the Rangers are going to be higher and the Florida Panthers are going to be lower. But the average take is said to be somewhere around 1.7 million a game that's all inclusive. That's ticket revenue, that's parking, that's concessions, that's jersey sales there. So when you figure all that out, that's roughly $2.1 billion in revenue. Now, if you figure out what players earn based on with everybody going to the cap. Now, everyone doesn't go to the cap.
Right.
So it's going to be less than this, but it's going to be $2.5 billion.
Right.
So let's take into account and say we're not going to be able to put any people in the stands. Now, we might be able to put some people in as we move forward. Who knows? But if you don't, basically what you're saying is the owners are going to be responsible for that $2.5 billion, dividing that by 30. That's your $80 million.
Right. Yep.
Because, we think, this is not the NFL where you could play to empty stadiums, and they don't anymore. Some of them don't. They actually have some fans in the building. And boy, it's a lot easier to socially distance in an arena that seats 60,000 as opposed to an NHL arena where there's 16 or 18,000.
Yep.
So that makes it difficult as well. But, the NFL's, their television deal is so strong that they don't really need. Okay. That's just bonus. That's extra money.
Yeah.
But in the NHL, our television deal, it seemed like we got a lot when we got a $2 billion deal with NBC. Yeah. But that's $200 million per season. $200 million divided by 31 teams, that's just a little over $6 million.
Yep.
So now our television money, $6 million, trying to pay that $80 million in payroll. So, that takes it down to $74 million. Now, there are other revenues that you would get with some sponsorship money that would be on the board. There'd be some local television money that would be factored in. But you're absolutely right. If there are no fans and we're playing 82 games, the losses will be astronomical. And here's the problem. The New York Rangers won't lose that as much money because they have, their local television deal is greater, and their signage and their sponsorship is greater and all that. But the smaller teams, where they don't have all that, they're going to lose even more money.
Well, and are we going to get, even the Rangers, are they going to get all their sponsorship money, right? I mean, is Delta?
Yeah.
So the league-wide revenues, are approximately $4.5 billion. And if you say that there's the salaries of $2.5 billion, there's some other, obviously, other revenues. But if they go and play, there's also other expenses there too. Yeah, so that's
travel.
Yeah,
travel's a big one.
Well, it was expensive, with all the hotels and everything when they did the bubble. That was an expensive venture, right?
Sure. So, now, we're not factoring in. You can play, of course, 105 playoff games, 56 in the first round if everybody went 7. 28 in the second, 14 in the third,
well,
7.
You have your numbers nailed down today, don't you?
Yeah. Well, I did some research because I think all this is interesting. We tend to just say, well, yeah, they're going to lose in that. But when you actually look at the numbers, you can really see, kind of where we're at. And, these owners, the NHL doesn't have a bunch of ragtag owners. Right. They got real people with real money. Yep. But the reason they have real money is they don't want to lose this kind of.
Yeah, it makes no sense. I mean, I don't listen. The players aren't going to initially. This is a negotiation, right? So the players aren't going to initially come out and just acknowledge that. But right. I thought they did a fantastic job during the pandemic at getting going again. There was no talk. It seemed like all of a sudden they had a deal done, right? So to me, it's both sides compromised. And they did, remember, they did redo the CBA for the next 2 years. So there's a cap of 20% on the escrow, right? But that was when they thought that they didn't know what it was going to be like to come back. So I'm assuming the players are going to initially say, well, okay, we already renegotiated the CBA. What are we negotiating again for? Well, because now we realize there's going to be nobody in the seats. So that old deal, well, if you don't want to negotiate it, then we just won't play. And I don't think.
Well, yeah, from a negotiation perspective, why would the league even want to play?
Yeah.
The
only owners are going to look at Gary Bettman. Let's get this straight. You want me to write a check for $80 million so that Jonathan Toews can go make his $8 million a year? It doesn't make sense.
Well, it does make sense from this perspective. The league is eventually going to come back and it's going to be whole again. Yep. And you want to be able to sustain that and keep, you don't want to lose your fan base. Out of sight, out of mind.
But no, it isn't that way, though. When we had the lockout for that full year, I hear what you're saying, but the fans came back better than ever.
They did, but it may be longer than that, just depending on, kind of that as well. But 1 year, what you're saying is we could go 1 year. But, do you really want to fracture relationship with the players as well? I mean, there's plenty of reasons on both sides to get this done
But
worked
it's
out.
always a contentious relation. I mean, listen,
It is.
the way that Donald Fair is fantastic at this, and he did the same thing that Bob Goodnow did before. They wanted to paint the picture for years leading up to negotiations that the owners were these terrible people. You couldn't trust them. They were idiots. They didn't know how to run the league and all that. So don't even listen to these guys. And they do that so they rally the players together against the owners. That's all part of the psychology. Yeah. So then they don't ever want to have it. I think Ted Saskin came in after Bob Goodnow, and then there was this other, I can't remember who it was. He was in there briefly running the Players Association, and they were both guys that wanted to get along more with the owners. It's nice to say that, but you've always got to have, like, the thing that Donald Fair has got in his back pocket that's so valuable. Centuries, decades of working with the Players Association of baseball and now hockey, of always standing up and fighting as hard as you have to fight to get whatever you need to get. So they already know that's what he's going to do.
Well, for sure, and I think that's what helped in order to hammer out the agreement for the bubble and everything else. This wasn't Donald Fair's first rodeo or Gary Bettman's first pandemic, but not their first hard line negotiation that had to be. They know what they're doing, and
they know each other now, right? They've negotiated so much with each other.
I mean, I have respect for both of them. I think Gary Bettman has done an excellent job of being the commissioner. He's grown the revenues. He's done the job he's supposed to do. And Donald Fair is a superior union head. He stands up for his players. He knows when to pick a fight and when not to. Smart man. Both of them are brilliant. You always you forget how what a great lawyer Bettman is until you see his brief whenever there is an appeal of a suspension, and he lays out the framework for what he has done in adjusting or not adjusting the suspension. And you read that brief and you're going, holy cow. Yeah, totally. You remember then he's the lawyer. Yeah. When you read it, I mean, it's a very sophisticated, presentation that's very legal, and I'm sure he runs it by, people as well. But I've known Gary for a long time, and that that's who he really is. So, I think they'll get this worked out, and I've heard all kinds of scenarios. The one I've heard the most is 56 games.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Where'd that number? Where did that come from?
I don't know. That's just the number that I've heard.
And then our girl Susan Brooks here asked the questions. They're going to do geographically. There's a lot of talk to have a Canadian division, right? Is one of the divisions.
Yeah, I mean, a lot will depend on where the pandemic is, whether or not the border is still closed, and that it's like the butterfly effect too. Like even that had causes issues. Like for example, I had Mike Harrington, the Buffalo Evening News writer, on another podcast with me, and he made a really good point. If they have that all Canadian division, by the addition of Taylor Hall, I think there's a feeling around the league that the Buffalo Sabres now, and with other additions they've made, now have a chance, an outside chance.
I'll believe that when I see it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's fair, but have an outside chance to make the playoffs in the Atlantic Division. No one's saying they're going to make it. They're just saying there's an outside chance.
Yep, that's fair.
If this Canadian division comes in and they have to move to the Metro, which seems very likely, they have zero chance, no chance.
Yeah.
To make the playoffs. So there will be like an impact. They have a now saying all that, we know from history is that the way we see the divisions before they unfold aren't necessarily what ends up happening, because you can't count on what injuries are going to happen. Like right now, there seems to be some uncertainty with the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Boston Bruins. Montreal got a little better. It looks more, Florida probably isn't going to be so good. But, those things have a way of working themselves out. Boston could be as strong as ever. Tyler Johnson may get moved to the Nashville Predators. And
you look at Vancouver last year, right? I mean, I think they're a good young team coming up, but I think they get better than everybody thought they were going to do. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think they're, when we're supposed to start this season, maybe when Gary Bettman really starts and Donald Fair start to get down to figuring out what they're going to do, because maybe we'll know more. I mean, I think what happens tomorrow in the election will have an impact, just in terms of how we're going to handle the pandemic and what we're going to do with it, whether there'll be any changes now that the election is over, whether we'll have more states. My son lives in Illinois, and right now they're considering going back to, if you leave the state, you got to quarantine for 14 days.
Yeah, that's what it is here in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, right?
Yeah.
States. Apparently the cases are spiking here in Connecticut again too.
Yeah, no, and it's so hard. So all those factors are going to play into what they do, and they're watching the other leagues, and I think plunking a few people in the NFL is working out fine, but again, they're much larger stadiums,
right?
Just
a little bit off track, but did you see where the OHL, the Ontario, one of the political leaders in Ontario, made it so that the OHL, the Ontario Hockey League, the top junior league, can't hit? They can't have hitting.
Yeah, no, I saw that, and I'm the only thing that I'm bothered by that is I'm a strong believer in addressing the pandemic, but there's no evidence to suggest that contact in a sporting event.
Yeah, they sit right beside each other on the bench.
Yeah. I just didn't understand any of that. So, but the bottom line is this is very complicated. That's why I say this is probably the most difficult decision that Bettman has faced. I have faith that they'll figure out what to do. I think they'll look at all the factors. Both he and Donald Fehr, I think players have proven they can be reasonable in their expectations. I think the owners do want to play. I think they want a continuity of seasons. I don't think they want to lose a season.
Right.
I think they're going to figure it out. They may try something eventually like the NFL is doing, and maybe just letting a couple thousand people in there. It is strange when you see and they show in the stands in the few cities where they're doing this. I mean, there might be 40 yards between some.
And it is weird. Like I was watching the Green Bay Minnesota game yesterday. They had nobody in the seats.
Yeah,
it was actually kind of funny. One of the Minnesota guys scored, and he went to do the Lambeau leap, and usually there's all the fans there.
There's no one to leap into. Yeah. No, I mean you can leap into a cardboard cutout.
The baseball guys actually got pretty funny. Like there were some times where the ball was hitting the outfield and they pretend they were throwing the ball to somebody in the seats.
I tell you what, those cardboard cutouts. Yeah. Hopefully, I saw people making fun of them, and I knew right away that they were going to be a big hit.
Oh, it was funny.
You could do so much with them. Yeah. I mean, every television game there'd be somebody that they point out who had been added to the stands.
Now, where did they get that? From my Sunday cooking, I think. They saw me.
I would doubt it. You are probably,
Real quick, I know this isn't a food show, but really quick, I made the sweet potato waffles yesterday. Oh, my God. I understand your wife makes those, but that was like.
Yeah, she makes them out of all kinds of things. She started doing that, kind of a while ago, and she, obviously picks healthier.
She beat me to it. Is that what you're trying to say? That like she's done it? Like Tom, what's the big deal? She's done it for a long time.
No, she's very interested in your cooking. We've talked about it a lot. It's interesting. You do your turmeric shots. Is that what you do?
Ginger and turmeric in the morning. Yep.
Yeah. My wife actually in our refrigerator now has shots. The little shot, those turmeric things that are tiny things. So, maybe she's picked that up from you.
Well, okay. Just give me a little bit of credit for something to help.
Yeah, for sure. But she's been into the sweet potatoes, for a long time. She's just like you. To her, carbs are evil.
Totally.
It goes Nazis in the 1940s, and then carbs, and she's ranking evil.
Well, especially when you have options of what you can put in your body. You can put bad stuff in your body. You can put good stuff in your body.
Yeah. Apparently I love evil. I don't know. I did know that I did, but apparently I do. But anyway, let's move on. I want to talk about one other thing too, the Mitchell Miller saga. This is the young player that was drafted in the 4th round by the Arizona Coyotes. The Arizona Republic newspaper received I believe it was an email or a letter from the mother of a victim of someone that Mitchell Miller had bullied when he was a young man. I think he was eventually caught and charged when he was 14 years old. And then he received a community service punishment, and I think he felt like he had paid his debt. And then lo and behold, this letter comes out, and the mother says, he didn't even apologize to us. Now, he did have an apology letter and sent it out to NHL teams, but the victim's family said no, he never contacted us. And so there was a lot of uproar about this, although I will say I wrote a column about it, and I'll talk about my take on it in a minute, but I felt it was 50-50. Some people felt that it was too harsh to do what the Coyotes did, which is to renounce their draft rights to him.
And University of North Dakota, where he was, is now saying he can't play on the team.
Well, that came subsequent to the Coyotes' decision. And the position of some people is, hey, look, he was only 14 years old now when he did this, and his life should not be ruined by what he did when he was an immature person. And my column take on it was that the description of the acts was so vile and disgusting that this warranted a longer reaction. And that how must the victims have felt to see that the Coyotes had drafted this guy, that he's moved on to his life, when this victim, who is developmentally challenged, has not gotten over this. And that there's still a path, and I felt for this young man to get his life back on track, if he ends up going to another program and ends up as a walk-on somewhere and sort of proves in his adult life, now that he's an adult, that he's a model citizen, then maybe in 2 or 3 years the NHL can decide whether or not he's worthy to play. But not everybody felt that way. Tom, what is your take on all this and the Coyotes' decision?
Well, I do agree that at 14 years old, we were all 14 at one time, and we all did things you look back at and thought, oh, God, that was stupid. Now, to different degrees and level, and this was, like you said before, was just vile. Like, the things he did to this young man were just totally unnecessary. It wasn't. I don't think there's any humor to it. It didn't. But okay, so the acts, and it was multiple acts, had been committed. What bothered me most is that there really has been nothing done to by the parents of Mitchell, the player that was drafted, or himself, to make amends, to apologize, to go to the family, to help them in any way they can, to put programs together to help other people, to teach other kids. They've done nothing. I almost look at it. It was terrible what happened, but okay, now it's an opportunity to maybe help a whole bunch of other kids on both sides. Other kids that are getting abused and other kids that are abusing other kids, to show them how wrong it is. But none of that had happened. Nothing was done whatsoever. And to now all of a sudden say, okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to send a letter to the NHL teams showing that I apologize. You didn't apologize. The families acknowledged that you didn't apologize. So that's the problem with me. Both, and listen, the boy was wrong, there's no question, but even with his parents. And again, I don't know all the details, just from what we're being told. The parents look like they've done nothing to teach their son how bad this was and to help teach other kids on both sides that they could act differently. So to me, that's the problem. It's like if they'd had spent the last 4 years doing some spectacular stuff to help other kids, then I'd say, you know what, the kid made a mistake, he learned from it, and he's helped other people. But that hasn't happened. So for me, there's nothing's changed. It doesn't look like he's really changed who he is from what he was at 14 years old. So that's my problem.
Yeah, and like I said, it's not all forms of bullying are horrible, and they can have. I've actually heard, since I've written my column, saying, this was the right move by the Coyotes. And in fact, I think they should take it a step further and try to figure out how he was even drafted, because most of the NHL teams decided not to put him on their draft list based on doing their own investigation of what happened. And this wasn't a case of him knocking books out of the kid's hand or, tripping him as he walked down the hallway or thing. This was a very vile and, very disgusting. And it was over multiple years.
Yep.
And there was I saw one report, and again, we don't know exactly what happened, about this continued on even after he was charged. Now, he did pay what would be the in the judicial system, paid the price that they said. He had some form of community service that he did. But we all know these actions have consequence beyond what happens in the judicial system. And anytime you do something that gets you in trouble with the law, even when you fulfill your commitment to whatever that is, whether it's probation or community service or jail time, the stigma extends beyond the completion of that you're looked upon for a while as someone that still has to prove yourself. And so I think in this case that is still warranted. He's still a young man, and the acts were so heinous. And as you said, the thing that's so bothersome is there was no effort, according to the victim's family, to see if that person is all right. And apparently he's still struggles with that. I heard from two people who were bullied after I wrote mine, said who one was in his 30s and one was in his 40s, who said they still think about it. Sure. Of what happened to them when they were bullied when they were young. So, this is a terrible thing. I don't want to see this kid's life ruined either. I think he does need to take stock of his life. But, like if you said to me, hey, look, at some point he's going to walk on at another college program and that coach is going to promise him nothing and say he's going to have to be a model citizen, and he earns his way on a team with an open tryout, and then he keeps his nose clean and is a model citizen on the team. So when he's 21 or 22, the NHL has watched him play for 3 or 4 years. They've heard the stories of how he's conducted himself. In the meantime, he's apologized to the family. He's helped mentor others who have gotten themselves in trouble and did all that. And then the NHL says, hey, welcome to our family. Because, in America, we love second chances.
Yeah, but here's my problem with that, though. He's had 4 years to do all that. His family has had 4 years. His parents, who are adults, have had 4 years to have their son do all that. Is he doing it because he really realizes how wrong he was and he wants to help people? Or is he doing it because this is going to way to rehabilitate his career to get himself in the National Hockey League? That's my concern.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment, but it's hard to judge the remorse of others. And, we don't know, like he's still he's 18 now, but he's going to be a different person at 20, and he'll be a different person at 22.
I guess part of my problem is, though, he's got parents, 2 adults that at 14 years old, their child did what he did to another person, and it appears they have done nothing.
Yeah.
Either one of them kids.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying that I don't think, you don't want to ruin 2 lives here.
Yeah, very true.
If you can help it.
And Leslie, you're right. That's an excellent way of putting it. I guess if they're going to reach out to the other child that he abused and really help make a difference in his life,
right,
then you're doing something good. You've corrected.
You are. So, but we need to see it. He needs to prove it to us. So, and I don't think he had done enough to earn. It's a privilege to be drafted by the NHL, and I don't know that he had done enough to prove that he warrants that. I'll be curious to watch what's going on here. And, someone asked me today, and it's a very valid question, what will I say if someone allows him to come on as a walk-on? Well, if it's next week, then I think we would suggest the same outrage that we did before. But, if it's next season, and by then he has done some things, right. And again, he's just got to slog his way through the other, walk-ons and try to make a team that way. Well, then it shows that he's, maybe that he is contrite.
Right. And I'm forgetting too, because I'm going to look at it from the agent angle, because I was an agent, and that the agent, whoever he has representing him. Now, again, if he's a college player, he can't officially have an agent. He can have a family advisor, but he still plays the same role. Like, he should be playing a big role too, right? Like, and again, it's a right thing for Duke. Right. He's going to take on the responsibility of representing that client. it's a full, like, I learned when I did it, it isn't just what you think it is at the start coming in negotiating contracts. I mean, there's a lot of things you've got to deal with, personal issues and things that happen. So, he should play a pretty big role too. And I hope he does. I don't know who he has as a family advisor.
No, and you never know the whole story. I mean, we don't know the whole story. Yep. We're looking from the outside in. But if I was, related to him, I would say, hey, let's get together as a family and the family advisor, and maybe we can get an expert on bullying, and let's just talk this through and see what we can do to kind of turn this into a positive in terms of helping others, and because maybe he doesn't even understand what he's feeling about all this or why he did it.
Kevin, great point, because I remember, like, when I played, I lived in a fantasy world. I had no concept of what the real world was.
Right.
When you finally retire from playing in the National Hockey League, it doesn't mean you're totally away. You're not aware of what's happening. But when you finally retire, you realize, wow, the way I was acting, the way I was getting treated, isn't the way the real world is. You're a professional athlete. You act differently. You get treated. We joke around sometimes about how hockey players want to look good all the time, right? About how vain.
Yeah. No. Well, they do.
Yeah, and the rest of the world doesn't care. I mean, like, sometimes you go to the Midwest and wherever it is, and people are just like, how I look really doesn't matter to me. That's what's inside of me that really matters. And you realize, that's a new concept.
Yeah. Well, it's a very disheartening event, and the disappointment in the organization. And I'm guessing, I don't know what happened, but obviously Armstrong had been hired there as a general manager, but wasn't part of the process.
Yeah, is that because of what happened with when they lost the first?
Well, he was still working for the Blues then, and so he's armed with all their information.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I thought it was because of some part of the penalty because of what they did with the other players. So just so everybody's aware, they lost the second round pick this year and the first round pick from next year because they were interviewing players before the dates and testing players before the dates they're allowed to do it. So that was when Chaika was the general manager, right? And now that had nothing. Armstrong, it had nothing to do with that.
No, I thought it was because he was still under contract with the Blues and had all their information, so he shouldn't really bring that to
that makes sense
to the Coyotes. But anyway, probably the perspective was, hey, we're in the fourth round. We don't have a second round pick or a first round pick. We can get this guy who was rated in the second round.
Right.
Let's do it. But someone should have been more attuned to say, because obviously they knew what the background was. Now maybe they didn't know to what extent. Because I think it did hit home for a lot of people when they saw sort of in the graphic terms what was done, as opposed to bullying, the word itself.
But remember, and this is delicate to bring it up, but you remember, like, Craig McTavish had a past, right, and went out and had a career afterwards. And everybody doesn't know Craig McTavish was drinking and driving and killed a woman. I think he spent a year in jail and came back and played in the National Hockey League. I mean, but I don't know the details of what he did with the family of that woman after, if he apologized or anything, right? So,
yeah, but I think it's also a different world now than it was.
Yeah, very true, very true.
Back then.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to consider here, but anyway, man, it's still the fastest half hour in sports. We've gone far here.
We get a little bit of cooking in too, so it's like we're touching all the bases.
Yeah, for sure. And but one thing I did want to bring up to you, and I want you to think about this. Tomorrow's election day.
Yes, it is.
On election day, I stay up late. I'm a junkie. And so when you're getting up on Wednesday morning at 3:30, I want you to think to yourself, Kevin just went to bed. I'm assuming I'll go to bed somewhere around 2:30 or 3.
And I will do my best to not watch any of it. Not that you know me, I love this country. I'm a patriot. I love the country, but the state of politics right now, it's just,
Well, I mean, I think that a lot of people feel that way, but I think this is an important election. Have you already voted?
Yes.
Yeah. Early voting is the key this year.
Yeah. Oh, apparently, all over the place, people have been early voting. It's
93 million people.
Is that what it is? Wow.
Yeah, have already voted. In all sorts of different ways, and the problem is, this is the other thing too. We always it takes a while to count all the votes, but this year, because so many of us have done it, might take longer, and that's going to become an issue.
Yeah.
That's always the case, even though it's better to get it right than.
If we can be guaranteed they're going to actually get it right.
So, well, I think they will. So,
okay.
All right, my friend.
All right. Talk to you Wednesday, everybody.
Good show. Thanks for watching us, everyone.